Well, it depends. If it happens in the Bermuda Triangle, maybe, right?
Yeah.
The Twilight Zone had me wondering if they only had the budget for one actor.
The Twilight Zone was a slowly building mystery into a panic.
The Twilight Zone tastes like a Granny Smith apple.
That's very good.
It's kind of
Hello.
tart.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fallingtower's Watch the First podcast in which we watch the first episode of a series so that you, the viewer and or listener, don't have to. With us, not as always, but semi-regularly, filling in for Michael Kenyon Rosenberg as special guest co-host,
Big shoes to fill.
Dr. Mohamed Noor.
Hey, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to be on.
And today we're joined by Neil Stevens.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Ryan. That really
Apple
means a lot.
enthusiast.
Thank you.
I like that, though. That was very good. So right before we hit record, Neil was like, I'm not going to finish this apple because I'm going to incorporate it into the discussion. And Mohamed and I looked at him very inquisitively, and he delivered, I think, personally.
Okay. I just didn't know what to say at the beginning, so it gave me something to say. And it left ambiguous. What's a Granny Smith? What does that mean? Is that you could go either way. A lot of people don't like Granny Smiths. Some people do.
People don't like Granny Smith. I'm just kidding.
You had an apple ready, and to that I say props. Get it? Okay. All right. Here we go. Bad jokes are out of the way officially.
No, we want more.
So everybody at home, please make sure to like this video, very importantly, and please subscribe. That's also very important. Share it with your friends. Comment below. Tell us what you think of the very first episode of the 1959 version of the Twilight Zone entitled Where Is Everybody? If you'd like us to review a series, in the comments below, just type in WTF and the series. That stands for Watch the First. So you could say WTF. I was going to say Babylon 5, but we already did that. So WTF Outer Limits. That was the Twilight Zone.
Sliders. You done sliders?
No, we haven't. Sounds delicious. WTF Sliders.
WTF Amazing Stories. That was kind of like that in the 80s.
Yes. Okay. So let's play. Let's have some fun. Let's get into this. This is the very first part of the show. It's my favorite part. After that, it's kind of like, whatever, who cares? And this is predictions. Michael Kenyon Rosenberg, who, by the way, is doing beautifully. He is healing up. He's feeling great. He's looking great. And he's eating trail mix, by the way, everybody at home. He likes to eat trail mix. So send him that.
He calls it predicaments.
There it is. He used to call it prediculations. I don't know if I like any of these, but he's not here to defend himself. All right, here we go. So we like to predict if the other person liked it. Mohamed and I have known each other for about, what, 2-3 years now? Yeah. And Neil and I have known each other, we were talking about off the air, early teens. We've known each other like 13 to 15 years, probably somewhere in that realm. Mohamed and Neil have known each other for early teens of minutes so far, so it's going to be a little tougher guess for them, but here we go. Okay, Mohamed, I'm going to predict that you are a science guy. You're also a mystery kind of guy and a sci-fi kind of guy. So I'm going to predict that you like this just below very much, like just a hair below very much. Neil, I'm going to say that you've removed the hair and you just like it very much. What do you guys think? What do you think, Mohamed?
I think, Ryan, that since I know you like sci-fi as well, and I know you like world building. I mean, you've commented on that in several Watch the First things in terms of just how things build out. And I think this show had that. So I think you actually like this a lot. I'd say, like, if I had to guess a score for you, like, maybe in the, mid-8 range, even something like that. Neil, I mean, I've seen your IMDb page. That's all I can really work off of.
So far, so good.
I think you also liked it, a lot. Maybe just a tiny, maybe a hair less than Ryan, but I'd still say like, upper 7s, low 8.
That's 2 hairs so far. What do you think, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, Ryan, I know you pretty well, and as been stated, you're a sci-fi kind of guy, and I gotta think you're gonna like this one a lot. So I'm thinking high 8s, 9s for Mohammed. I don't know you, but I know you're scientific, study science and all, and if you're a science nerd, I mean, how can you not love the Twilight Zone? I would assume, unless you're like, what is all this BS science stuff they're throwing at us? Then maybe not. But I'm gonna guess that you really like this show a lot. I'm even more than Ryan. I'm gonna guess.
He's the dean of natural sciences at Duke University. So yes. He's also an occasional science advisor for Star Trek, ladies and gents. So big time sci-fi and science guy. Also, oh my goodness, Michael, I want to predict Michael. Michael, I'm going to say you like this very much because this was kind of a thinking person's episode. And Michael likes thinking person's things because he is a thinking person. What do you guys think? You think you guys both know Michael? What do you think? You think you liked it?
Totally. I think you liked it a lot.
Wow.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to jump on the bandwagon. I kind of want to be like, nah, you know what? Nah.
Just giving it a 4.
He probably liked it. I'm guessing he's a fan.
All right, everybody at home, you've gotten a lot of hints. Basically, all of us think that everybody liked it. Okay, we don't know what Mike's predicting, but if you guys want to go the safe route, just predict that we liked it. If you have a sneaking suspicion that one of us may have thought it was mediocre or subpar or boring, then go ahead and put that. You'll find out real soon, right? Okay, so moving forward into the next game, we compare and contrast what we expected versus what we got. Michael has a bunch of convoluted names for them that Mohamed probably remembers.
Expect Getchins.
Yeah. I think that's the main one. Okay. Neil's like, I don't know what they're talking about. It's a different language.
Flappity, flappity, blippity, gookity, gook. Yeah.
It's a Michael Kenny Rosenberg fan, so I have to memorize all those things.
Also, Michael, when he and I were talking, Neil, we talked about you for a moment. And when we were talking about how you would be a good guest for this show, we remembered that last time you were annoyed that we kept picking you for cartoons. So we're like, okay, we got to give him one that might fit him because, you're like a horror filmmaker kind of guy. You like these kinds of mysteries and things like that. And you like old crap, and, you're one of those, a lot of people like old crap. A lot of people are snobby like myself, but we're like, let's serve Neil a T-bone steak rather than keep giving him corn nuts,
Yeah, the more old crap. The older and the crappier, the better. Just keep that coming.
Also, this episode was suggested to us by Scott Jensen, I believe. I should have checked on that sooner. Michael,
13th on IMDb.
What's
13th Scott Jensen.
Oh,
that's
really?
That's where the XII comes from in his YouTube thing.
No way, really?
I'm 10. I'm the 10th Neil Stevens. Then I didn't
I'm
know
the 5th Mohamed Noor.
I'm the guy.
You're it.
The first one. Okay, but that's what I got because I have the T. Maybe if I didn't have the T, it wouldn't be. That's why I added the T way back in the day when I moved to LA as a musician. I Googled my name and there was some minor league baseball player with my name. And I was like, fuck that guy. I'm using the T. Okay. So anyway, I just checked. It was Scott Jensen that suggested this to us. Thank you very much, Scott. This one is for you. Let's get into it. So what we expected versus what we got. Mohamed, before you watched this first episode, and maybe you've seen it before, what did you expect?
So I didn't remember this episode in particular, but I definitely had watched the Twilight Zone a lot. I had a friend as a kid. Her name was Francesca. I'm still friends with her. She recommended it, and I remember. So I'm talking back, back in 1979 or 80 or something like that. So I was probably like not quite 10. I remember thinking this was an interesting show, or this would be something kind of interesting just in terms of mysterious. For this particular viewing, I didn't remember the episode. I actually had to guess what it was, and I told my wife, "Is this that one with the guy who gets stuck in the safe and he comes out and everybody's gone because nuclear wars happen and then his glasses break?"
Oh, cool.
No, it wasn't that episode.
Time Enough at Last, Burgess Meredith.
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay, we're getting a hint here from Neil. So that was it. That's what you expected, Mohamed?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be that episode, but I knew the Twilight Zone very well because I used to watch it a lot as a kid. It would air at like 11:30, midnight, and 12:30, and I'd either set the VCR recorder. If I was up late, I'd watch it. I was always excited to see it. So
very nice. Neil, what did you expect? I think we know the answer already.
Is this where I try to pretend like I hadn't seen this before?
No, just tell us what you expected before you watched this particular episode today or yesterday.
Yeah, so I had seen this, but it had been a little while. I expected a mystery, a mysterious premise. I knew the basic idea of it, but I realized I confused the ending of the episode and the ending. I don't know if I can get into it or whatever, but the ending ended up being different from what I thought it was, and actually it made way more sense the way it does end than the way I had it in my head for whatever reason. But I guess we can get into that when we get into the episode. But yeah, a mystery, and then there's in typical Twilight Zone fashion, there's the reveal of the mystery at the end of the episode.
Well described.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I expected. I feel like I had seen 1 or 2 or 5, Twilight Zone episodes when I was a kid, because I do remember it being on late at night. And I remember when I was a little kid, people would talk about, it's kind of like the cool thing, it's like, "Ooh, do you watch the Twilight Zone?" Or "I like the Twilight Zone," or something, like camp counselors when I would be in summer camp or something like that. But then when I look back when I was going to watch this episode and I saw 1959, I was like, holy Christ, I'm going to hate this thing. Anything pre, I don't know, 1980, except for Three's Company, 77. I'm like, it's practically unwatchable for me. So I was a little concerned, but I was very pleased to see it was only 25 minutes. In fact, Michael and I, that's kind of how Michael sold it to me. He's like, "Hey, it's only 25 minutes." I was like, "All right, let's do it." I'm in. But I didn't particularly expect to like it because it was like super old and it's the first episode. And usually, they're still feeling things out back then. Nowadays, pilots are very good. They have to be because it's hyper competitive. But pre-2010, pilots weren't always very good, but that's what I expected. Mohamed, I almost called you Michael. What did you actually get?
I got a very engaging episode. I did not remember this episode at all. So if I'd seen it, I'd completely forgotten, which I remember many episodes from back then, but this one I didn't remember. I found myself really captivated. I did not know what was going on. I had various guesses throughout, like, oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. All my guesses turned out to be wrong, but I just found a really engaging sort of mystery and the build and the panic and then the resolution. Neil, you alluded to this too, that the resolution was not something I would have guessed at all. I thought maybe it's going to turn out he's dead or something like that. Because there are a lot of Twilight Zone episodes where the person's dead and then they find the doorway to heaven or something like that, or they are in hell. But no, none of those things. It was actually much more, frankly, realistic.
What about you? What did you actually get, Neil? Patrick Stevens. By the way, you guys, his name is Neil Patrick Stevens. How cool is that? NPS. All right.
Let me rename my thing. I'm thinking of going back to the Neil Patrick Stevens because I started as Neil Patrick Stevens because Ryan was like, "Let's put in your IMDb, Neil," and I was like, it's close to Neil Patrick Harris. But now all these years have gone by. I'm like, you know what? It sounds cooler when you got a middle name as a director. So I'm going back to Neil Patrick Stevens. So you were right all along, Ryan. I guess that was my point.
I finally got one.
Oh, we didn't do the what's it called? The narrator thing.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay, well, that's what we'll do. Everybody put in your predictions still. And then we are going to go see, this is Michael. We miss you. Michael would have slapped me so hard. He would have virtually slapped me. Let's put a pin in this. Mohamed, what the heck is this show even about, by the way?
Sure. So I'll try to imitate the narrator voice.
Yes.
A man in uniform who's lost his memory finds himself at the outskirts of an unfamiliar town. Everywhere he goes, no one is around. Teapots whistle, cigars burn, phones ring, and movies play at the cinema, but he can't find people. Panic builds, and 16 years before Freddie Mercury asked himself these same questions, this man thinks to himself, is this the real life? Is this just fantasy?
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Just so if you had a cigarette like Rod Serling, that would have been the cherry on top. That was
cherry on top of the cigarette, right?
I'm sorry to interrupt your what we actually got though, Neil.
But yeah, Neil, what did you actually get? Thank you, Mohamed.
So I was impressed by the production quality. Kind of Ryan, what you were alluding to about television. Well, I guess you said before 1980. I would say, before 1960 or in the 60s, a lot of the TV did not have good quality production. They weren't shot like movies were, with cinematography and depth of field and just making them look really cinematic. That wasn't a thing in television back then, but I think Twilight Zone was one of the exceptions where they really cared about, Rod Serling, especially because he's the creator, cared about the production quality. And so I was just very impressed by the directing, the acting, the music. Oh my God. Did you see the composer was Bernard Herrmann from Alfred Hitchcock films, Psycho, Vertigo. Come on, Ryan, you're a movie lover. One of the all-time great musical composers. The music was absolutely beautiful. So I was very impressed by the whole just production quality for a 1950s TV show.
Yeah.
One thing that caught my eye, which was kind of funny. Did you notice there was one scene that caught my eye in terms of just the cinematography? This is something you would never see just randomly, but the whole point of the episode was how everybody was gone and nothing was there. But in the scene where he was at the car door with the mannequin, there was this giant fly on the car door and it was like walking around.
Yes, I very much noticed that. And I remember thinking, wow, it's a 3-person scene now. There are 3 things, but only one actually is a living human, but there are 3 things in that. And it was big and it stayed there. And Mohamed was like, I want to meet it because Mohamed studies fruit flies.
I do.
Oh, okay. I noticed the fly too. I love flies in shots. I'm a huge fan. Anytime you can throw in flies, insects, it creates this three-dimensionality of space or whatever. They're probably hard to commandeer because they are flies. They're probably harder than cats, getting a cat in a scene. But when it's there, it makes it more believable. This is a world.
Okay, which reminds me, I'm going to tell you guys what I actually got, because that reminds me of something that also grabbed my attention, which was the opening scene. He's walking, he's just walking down a dirt road. He sees a stick on the ground. He reaches to grab it and he stumbles. He had one blocking action and he screwed it up and they kept the take. And I was like, is it what? That's my first note, is they fucked up the first, he's just supposed to pick up a stick and he like stumbled. I watched it like 3 times. I'm like, and they were like, let's keep it. That's our best. That was really their best take, when he bends over to pick up a stick, and their best, what they did 10 times. And that was the best take they had, or they didn't. So I was like, oh man, this does not bode well. But anyway, the fly in there and they keep it. Maybe these were deliberate choices, but this is what I got. So it didn't start at first. I was like, oh geez, this is definitely in the 50s, those dummies in the 50s. But it was really freaking good. I actually surprisingly found myself feeling something like a little sense of stress, and and anytime a show can make you feel something, they've done their job. And I was, I'm a little prejudiced against old crap, as everybody can probably tell. But every once in a while, like a show like this, I mean, especially 50s, great job. It was well written. There were so many great details, and it kept me guessing, not the least of which being that they kept alluding or basically giving us the red herring that people had just been there. The cigar smoking, the water boiling. I forgot what there was a third thing at least that showed that somebody had just been there,
The projector, there was a movie showing.
Yeah, there was another one. But anyway, so that's totally a red herring. That makes us think, like, did everybody just leave like 20 seconds ago? Or everybody is leaving. Oh, he's coming to the police station. Everybody run, or he's coming here. Everybody go over here. And it has nothing to do with any of it. And so that was equally annoying to me and equally like, okay, I get it. That's what they want to do. They want to say like, hey, everything's a guess. You're not going to know for sure until the very end. What do you guys think of the red herrings? I know Neil's going to say he loved it.
It was very much like a rapture thing where everybody just kind of vanished wherever they were. Yeah.
There was this sense, of course, in the 1950s with, the atomic bomb, and there was definitely an undercurrent of kind of annihilation. And he kind of like mentions that in the show where in the episode where he's like, well, this couldn't have been a nuclear attack because everything is still there. I think there's definitely that feeling of at any moment, everyone can be wiped out, which is something they do address in other episodes of the Twilight Zone. But I thought that red herring part was interesting as well.
Oh, I was with you. I totally thought the same thing the whole time. But like, where did they all go? Why did they all vanish? Why did they all? And it was clearly like they just vanished. It wasn't that people packed everything up and left. So,
And then there were a lot of nice touches, like when they have the book that says "Last Man on Earth," another red herring where you go, "Oh my God!" Maybe the rapture thing, Mohamed, like what you were saying. Where I actually felt something, and actually put in capital letters in my notes, nice touch, was when he went to the jail cell and you could see the shadow of the door closing. We all start stressing out there. We're like, oh, dude, don't. And then he turned around and you don't think he's going to make it. You think that since he got locked into that phone booth, he's going to get locked into this cell as well. But just in time, he pushed it open. And I remember thinking, wow, that was really good. Like it made me feel something. It made me like go, oh my God, what's going to happen? It
was a bit of a foreshadowing as well with the phone booth in the prison.
Yes.
I thought the phone booth was first, right?
Phone booth was first.
Okay. Yeah. So that's why, because of the phone booth was what made me and probably most viewers stress out that like, oh my God, he's going to get locked in again. Yeah. But this one's even worse,
The weird thing to me, speaking of the phone booth, the weird thing to me is why the phone rang. That seems inconsistent with everything else in the whole story. Like, why did the phone ring?
It's another red herring.
Yeah.
It was just all things to get the viewer to say, I got it. This is what happened. This is what it is. And it was all just the writer saying, nope, I'm just throwing a bunch of crap that you are going to think is relevant, but it's not.
It's direction.
Yeah, I think that's what the Twilight Zone in this episode, I think that's what it does well is there's a lot of shows that are kind of mysterious, but there's not enough for you to guess what the mysterious thing is. And you're just like, I don't know what the hell is going on here. And sometimes you can lose interest because you're like this is just like what is this? With the Twilight Zone, they're throwing stuff at you. So you're like, oh, it's that. Oh, the phone's ringing. Oh, it's this, or it could be that. It could be this. And you become an active participant in what's happening. And then, of course, it's up to them to have to deliver an ending where you didn't guess it, but it seems obvious in retrospect. And a lot of shows, movies try to do this sort of thing, and it almost never works as well as it does in the Twilight Zone, in my opinion.
I thought it was very sophisticated writing, especially for that time. I didn't feel like writing was very sophisticated back then, but obviously there was some good writing, just like there's good writing in every generation. But that's part of the reason why I can't watch old stuff, is I'm just like, oh God, this is so obvious and so boring. But clearly I was wrong that it was all like that. A lot of it was very sophisticated writing where I'm like, wow, they wrote this well 62 years ago.
That Bill Shakespeare, 400 years ago, people could write stuff.
Yeah, Shakespeare back in the 70s. Jeez,
crazy.
Boy, oh boy. There were one or two things though that I was like, okay, this is too dumb. Like when the guy literally runs into a bicycle, a parked bicycle.
And the mirror, he like ran very directly into the mirror. It's like, you didn't see it? It's like right in front of you. That was a little funny.
We've all maybe done that. Maybe. Or in a panic or a drunken. I don't know.
He wasn't in a panic.
But a bicycle, especially because it wasn't like he turned a corner. It was like 100 feet ahead of him, and he's running for the bike. I thought he was running to the bike to get on it and ride it, but he just runs into it. I'm like, what are you, an idiot?
Totally. I thought the same. I thought he was going to bike to the next town or something. Yeah. I'm surprised he didn't go into people's houses. That's what I would have done in that case. I would have been like, okay, I don't see anybody downtown. Let me go start knocking on doors and see if I can go into people's houses and see if I can find them at home. But he never did that. But different strokes, different folks.
Or at least go eat the food that you started cooking, right? We didn't get the satisfaction.
He did have the ice cream.
Yeah, he did have that. Neil, would you have written man returns to the diner to enjoy his eggs over easy and hash browns?
I would have, I would have went to the bank, because he's, at the beginning, he's like, I got $2.85 and I'm an American. And first of all,
American money. That's right.
That's his pickup line.
A very American thing to say, but I was like, you only got $3. Maybe, go. No one's there. Go to the old bank. Grab some cash. No one's around. Not that it makes a difference if no one's there, but
actually, that scene, I'd forgotten about that. That was something I didn't anticipate going in, is that he didn't know who he was. Because he knew exactly how much money he had, and then all of a sudden, this idea that he had to identify it, because he said American money, like, what a weird thing to say. And then he said, I guess that means I'm an American. I don't remember who I am. Like, oh, I see why you're saying that now. But that was an interesting angle to it, that not only did he not know where he was or what was happening, but he didn't even know who he was.
Yes. Yeah. That added another dimension to it.
Yeah, and I like how they
sound, but of mind.
And I like how they revealed it too. That was a good reveal, because then that's what this show also did really well, was revealing, all the backstory or the exposition, which is really hard to deliver exposition with just one actor. Because if you have two actors, the person goes, oh, where are you from? What's wrong? Why did you do that? And they tell you. But if there isn't one, it's hard for them to give you the exposition, that you need. And, that was a great way to do it. Or another time when he was talking to himself in the mirror too, was another good one.
So who's your favorite character?
Fly.
Fly for sure was Neil's. Yeah. I guess I liked the phone booth. The phone booth was a survivor, because I immediately, when I'm, you put yourself in his shoes, and I'm thinking, as soon as that phone booth door closes, my immediate impulse would be like, well, nobody's in this town. I'm breaking this window. Who gives the phone booth? Like, I was just like, break that thing. What do you care? Nobody's there. And you're in a panic. Just break it. And what? Who's going to yell at you? Who's going to put you behind bars for breaking a window on a phone booth? Those things, we don't even need those. That was
anyway. Back then, that was a big deal. Phone booths. They were, that's a federal offense, Ryan.
That's also how you can turn into Superman, I heard back then.
My first thought was like, well, you could tell this was before you could do the *69 and just call the person back.
It's 90s.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Was there anything you guys didn't like about this episode?
The only thing that bugged me a little bit, but I think it had to happen, is how much he was talking. Like, dude, you're saying a lot when clearly there's nobody here. Like for example, the diner, he'd walk through all the rooms of the diner, but he kept on talking all the time. Like, who are you talking? You saw there's nobody here. You went into the kitchen, you went out the back. So, that was a little bit funny, but I mean, it made the story much more interesting, because if it was just silent, it would have been kind of boring. So I get why they did that.
As someone who talks to themselves an unhealthy amount, I did not even pick up on that. I was like, this is just normal behavior when you're alone, having conversations with yourself. But
what do you usually say?
Are
you the narrator, like in your own story? Are you like, well, I guess I'm going to the kitchen now. Time to pour some Cheerios. Where's the milk? Well, it's probably still in the fridge. I'll go find it. Do you just kind of like do that, or what?
Sometimes I picked up that habit because I noticed when I'm like writing, if I talk the story out, it like comes to me, right? So, I tell my wife, I'm like, hey, if you hear me like talking, it's just part of my process. Or you explain it to like a person who's not even there. But I realize that once you start talking to yourself on a regular basis, it carries over into other parts of your life, even when you're not writing. So I'll find myself muttering things to myself, when I'm not writing now, and I don't know that I can turn it off. So I think this is just how it's going to be.
That does help with the writing process. And for me, it also helps me to enjoy when I'm reading sports quotes. I read them aloud in the person's voice. And I go, God, I can really, like, if for example, Neil, if you are reading a Kevin Garnett quote, you know how he talks, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Ask Chuck. He's been in a bar fight, right?
Yeah. And you
could read it out loud like Garnett and actually enjoy it more. It's like you're actually hearing him say it, right? There you go.
Like a bar fight. You ever been in a bar fight, Chuck?
Ask Chuck. He's been in a bar fight.
Ask Chuck. You've been in a bar fight.
Mohamed's like, I'm in the Twilight Zone right now. Anyway, that's anybody that watched early 2000s basketball knows what that quote is. It's a good one.
Mid 2000s.
Sorry, Neil.
All right, just clarifying for
Neil is the Rajon Rondo of this show.
I'm gonna take that as a compliment because I respect Rondo. So thank you.
That's how I meant it. Sorry, Mohamed. All right, we're gonna get back on track here. There's like one person in the audience that's like, I totally get this, and everybody else is like, I am changing the channel so fast. Yeah, I didn't. There was one point where he was talking to himself that it didn't work for me. The talking to himself, I was fine with, except for at one point where I was like, okay, that did feel forced. It's when he saw, in my notes, I said, obvious fake woman is obvious. It's like, when he first sees her in the car far away, you could already tell it's a mannequin, right? But okay, for the purposes of the show, you can accept that it's not. But why was he trying to talk to her from 30 feet? Oh, hey, I didn't really, nobody would do that. They would walk up to the person and then talk. Boy, you wouldn't believe the day I've had. I thought that, like, what are you doing? Or at least speaking while he's walking up. That was the one. Yeah. I understand why they did it, but it didn't work for me. It didn't work.
It's fair. I really like it's time to wake up now. I bet this is a dream. I like those. I mean, that seemed very real to me. Like, okay.
Yeah, the ending to me was a mixed bag. I thought that the waking up and hallucinating thing was kind of a cop-out. Honestly, it kind of dropped the show for me. I was like, come on, all those red herrings you sent us and none of them were really relevant. That's not fair. I want to be able to solve the mystery. And you can't solve the mystery if the solution has nothing to do with any of the things, the hints that they gave you. Maybe that's the Twilight Zone style. But
the Air Force was the only minor one, but that's it. It's just the Air Force piece.
The cigar, the colonels or whatever, the generals were smoking cigars. So that was
but that doesn't give you a hint as to how to figure it out. The Air Force did help a little bit. You're right, Mohamed, but none of these hints actually led you to what the actual solution is, right? And is that like what the Twilight Zone usually does?
Mix.
Well, I don't. I mean, to me, like he's smelling the cigar smoke from the people who are smoke. So that becomes part of his dream. So, what else? The Air Force thing. I mean, generally speaking, I think they do a good job of like just putting in things that are in his world, that are in his world while he's hallucinating, like the phone booth. He's stuck in the phone booth. Then he's almost gets stuck in the prison.
Interesting.
If you notice the clock, he knocks over the clock at the timer in the kitchen. He knocks over the timer and he picks it up, and it's like the same time it is when he's in his isolation booth and he's hitting the, so there are a lot of
symbolism there. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay. That helps a little bit, but that certainly, if you ended it right before that reveal, you wouldn't be able to piece those things together. Let's see. There was a cigar. There's a clock. Oh, he must be hallucinating from some Air Force. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way you can figure it out. And I want something to where, like, you have a chance at figuring it out based on the hints. But then it redeemed itself a bit at the very end when they're like, someday we're going to go to the moon. And then, of course, we all do the math. We're like, oh, yeah, what was it? 1969, I think, was when we went to the moon. This was 59. I was like, oh, wow, how interesting. They're like, one of these days we're going to go to the moon and all these crazy things are going to happen.
There's some interesting facts on that. So we actually, the 69 was landing on the moon with that mission they were describing. The mission was just to go orbit the moon and come back. It wasn't even necessary to land on the moon. So it actually would be a little bit earlier. But it was interesting because they said that he was in the box for 484 hours, so about 20 days. And there weren't any missions that were that long that didn't involve a space station. Like, and there were no missions that were that, like, if you look at the Apollo missions, they were all much shorter than that. So it's interesting that, at the time, people thought it was going to take that long. Most of the missions were like 8 days or something like that. They were pretty quick. So
that was interesting. And no one had been in space at that point, so they didn't know. I mean, now we know you can be in space for that time and it's not a big deal. But no one had done it at that point. And it actually got me thinking of, like, there's kind of a parallel with what's happening now, because we're, give or take 10 years out from, like, potentially going to putting a person on Mars.
Right. From actually going to the moon for real instead of faking it. Right, guys?
Right. Yeah, right. First, we got to actually go to the moon for real. Once we accomplish that goal, we'll go to Mars. And there's a lot of, like, uncertainty with, like, can the human body, be able to withstand that? And I mean, we know people can be in space for long enough. I think 7-8 months. People have been there for like a year, but going that far out and with the radiate, there's kind of a parallel to now where we haven't done that yet, and we don't even know if the body can handle it. Will it change? Will it alter if it goes that far away? So I found some parallels with what's happening now.
It's true. The psychological aspects would be huge. I mean, there was that group in Hawaii didn't they spend like a year trying to simulate being on Mars or something like that, and in really close quarters? And they said the hardest part was just you end up like hating, or not hating, but you end up getting really annoyed by the habits of the people around you. So
right. I bet. Yeah, because that's what they say about, like, a significant other. They say the things that you think are cute and quirky when you first start dating someone is the things that you grow to hate about them after 10 years or whatever. You're like, and the way she chews her food, but the first couple weeks you're like, oh, she chews with her mouth open. That's so quirky. Right. But actually, Mohamed, not to get too far off track on that, but haven't they also tested and actually done experiments on how, like, plants and animals and how things grow out in space and how how space and weightlessness actually does affect those things, right?
Oh yeah, you lose a lot of bone mass, for example, things like that. And then there's exercises you can do to try to reduce that loss of bone and muscle mass. But yeah, and then as Neil mentioned too, I mean, there's massive cosmic rays, and that's a long mission because it's going to take you months to get there. It's not like you just like going to the moon. It's going to take a long time. So yeah, I don't know what the long-term effects of that long an exposure would be, because nobody's done that. So
they studied Mark Kelly and his twin.
That's right.
I forget his name, but his twin was in space for like a year, and then they were doing tests on, like, has his twin changed because he was up in space for so long compared to being down on Earth. I don't know if they ever came out with results of that, but that was like a question. Like,
you gotta give us the answer. What?
Maybe it's ongoing. I don't know. Yeah, that sounds like the start of a sci-fi movie. Like someone comes back and they've changed. That's an episode of the Twilight Zone right there.
Oh man.
Get heavy science and have them go really fast and have there be time dilation where now they're different ages.
Yeah.
I understand that reference. Okay. So I feel like we could talk about this forever, but sadly we don't have forever. Speaking of time dilation. Any final thoughts on this episode before we move forward? $2.85 American money. I didn't think was that much even for 1959, but maybe it was. The fake woman, everybody could tell. Police station. He did say, I wish I could shake that crazy feeling I'm being watched. That was the one that I absolutely did pay attention to because it was a feeling. It wasn't just something he saw or picked up, because that's our perception of what we think might be relevant. The one thing that was his perception of what was relevant is being watched. So that one I did believe. I'm like, okay, that's definitely a thing. But then I'm thinking, are they just moving from one building to the next and like looking out the window? Oh, now he's at the train station, you guys. Oh, shoot, he's coming here. All right, leave your cigar. Just run. You know.
So when you first saw the people, where did you think they were?
I didn't have a guess. I was just
I didn't know
okay.
either.
I was just like, okay, here's our answer.
Yeah, I was thinking like Truman Show kind of thing, where it was, you know, this big set that somehow they're all able to watch, but you know that wouldn't really work for the time, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what it felt like.
When I thought of this episode, I had seen it a long time ago. I thought that they had created this simulation in his head, and they were watching. They're like,
with the wires,
we got to see how someone can handle isolation. So let's put him in this town where he's completely isolated. And for some reason, I thought that's what they were watching, was the simulation.
That's where I went to.
It wasn't that. It was he was imagining it because he was isolated for so long, which makes more sense, I guess, than like, why would you put someone in a town to test their ability to hang out in a space station? But yeah, I think that's what I was thinking, because they were watching. I'm like, what are they watching? Maybe they're watching a simulation, the simulation.
Speaking of what are they watching, Neil Patrick Stevens, let's talk about you and the things that you make that people watch. Wow.
Great transition.
Great. Yeah. Amazing segue.
So, Neil, you are a filmmaker. You know, you're like director, producer, writer. You start off as an actor, then you start saying, hey, I can make stuff. And you've been pretty successful at it, making some pretty awesome short films with a bunch more good stuff in the works. Can you tell us, just to kind of open this door, what is your most, what are you most proud of out of all of your your completed works?
Ooh, well, I would have to say the last thing that we did together, Ryan, I think Face Your Fears, which I got. Well, I guess I show the box in every episode, but I'm not sure Mohamed has seen it yet. But
I have not.
Can you?
Yes. Oh yeah.
It's like a board game horror, sci-fi-ish, Twilight Zone.
It looks so cool. We see it for like half a second.
It's hard with the, I got the background this time. Usually I don't have the background, but
you could take off the background for a second and then hold it up. Unless that would upset you.
I gotta figure out how to do that. But I mean, you can watch, if anyone is interested in seeing more of the box, you can watch the short film. I would say I'm most proud of that. That's probably been the most successful one so far.
And this was also kind of like this episode. It was also something with basically one main person just kind of talking to herself and running through like this mystery, very Twilight Zone-esque, but a little more Hitchcockian in that it was horror. Neil does mystery and horror, like horror mysteries with a twist, right?
Yeah, you could argue it's very Twilight Zone-esque. There's actually one specific reference to the Twilight Zone on
Monkey's
her backpack.
paw?
No, well, I don't think
it just reminds me, I don't even know if that's a Twilight Zone episode, but it reminds me of that thing that had like a monkey's paw where you like wish on it or something. What was that? Twilight Zone? What was that?
No, that's an old
older
story, horror story.
Okay. So what was the Twilight Zone reference?
So there's kind of two. There's one blatant one, which is on her backpack. there's a big patch that says nothing in the dark. And she's afraid of the dark. And she keeps saying nothing in the dark, nothing in the dark. Well, Nothing in the Dark was a episode of the Twilight Zone.
Very good.
With a very young Robert Redford, who plays Death, and he's visiting this old woman who is afraid of letting anyone in the house because she's terrified of Death taking her. And then she sees glorious, handsome Robert Redford and lets him in, and it turns out he's Death. So that was an episode of.
Sounds like a Tinder story. Right? It turns out the person's just not what you thought they were going to be.
Just Death.
What's the subtle reference to Twilight Zone? This is good stuff.
The subtle reference is, so the box distributes little messages that indicates that it's like watching you and paying attention to you. And there's another episode of the Twilight Zone called, I think it's called Nick of Time, with what's his name, Captain Kirk.
Shatner.
Right. Because he was in 2 of those episodes, right?
Yeah, he was in Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, and he was in this Nick of Time. So he's playing this fortune game, and he's like putting 5 cents in, and he keeps getting it, and it's like predicting things that will happen, but it's very ambiguous, and it seems like maybe he's letting it get to his head. And he's like, no, look, it said like it's true, it's going to happen, and he starts going crazy, like he won't leave. He's afraid that he's going to die if he leaves this like diner, because it's warning him something's going to happen, and he just keeps playing this thing. It's a great episode. I highly recommend, if either of you haven't seen it, to watch it. And William Shatner is fantastic in it. So that kind of resembles the way the box would give information. And some people have picked up on that. They said, hey, like the Nick of Time, that Twilight Zone.
Wow, that's really cool. And Mohamed, this is perfect for our audience, the virtual TrekCon audience, released right before Christmas, and it's called the Saint Nick of Time. This is good stuff from you, Neil.
Totally.
Oh, good.
Do you have any projects that are going to come out like really soon?
At the moment, I'm just writing feature films. Okay. And just to mention another Twilight Zone thing, since that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I wrote an entire feature script based on another episode of the Twilight Zone called Next Stop Willoughby, which is another wonderful episode where this guy, he's like a 1950s Madison Avenue ad man, and he hates his job, and his wife doesn't respect him, and he's on a train, and he like takes a nap, and he wakes up in the 1890s where everything is like chilled out and slow, and there's no cars, and everyone's happy. And he's like, oh, I want to go back. And he wakes up, but then he's back in his shitty world. And he's like, oh, I want to go back. Where's Willoughby? And there's no Willoughby. What do you mean Willoughby? There's no stop here that says Willoughby. Well, he eventually goes back, and he's able to stay there. And you find out that he actually jumped off the train and committed suicide. Oh, but he was able to stay in Willoughby. And so in my feature film, the person doesn't go back to the 1890s. They go to the 1990s, where things were a little simpler. We still had technology, but things were cool. No smartphones. MTV played, like music videos, pre 9/11, all that stuff. So there's a little bit of actually, Mohamed, I was going to ask you, because I got to like justify traveling to this alternate dimension. So I was like, okay, so he's on a boat. It's like on this island, and I was like, they go through this electrical storm where there's like a wormhole, and they go through the wormhole, and then it's like the 1990s. Does that sound? Oh
yeah, that happens all the time.
Seems legit. All the time. Well, it depends. If it happens in the Bermuda Triangle, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as you can, usually wormhole works pretty well. A wormhole, a black hole, you throw that in there, and it's a total wild card. I mean, you can get away with a lot.
Or a black hole doesn't have an end. Black holes just stops. A wormhole goes somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how many black holes do we have on Earth, Mohamed?
Like
I think 7 or 8 last I counted. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, could a wormhole open on Earth? Is that possible? Could that?
I have no idea.
I would say theoretically, and I believe we actually are starting to find existence of what we believe would be wormholes, if that's what we're kind of calling them, right? Then sure, then theoretically they could open up anywhere, right? I mean,
I mean, or it could be devastating. I think that when you say could, I
well,
think
yeah,
you're thinking in the context of consequence, not just the possibility.
Yeah, it would wipe us out. And so would a black hole, FYI, right?
Definitely would.
We'd be stretched so fast we wouldn't know what to do with ourselves.
Getification. That's the term for what happens when you get near there.
Yeah.
Well, this is fun. Sounds like Mohammed's going to have another science advisor gig coming up soon.
This is all in Dr. Erin McDonald's area. That's more her thing than mine.
Yeah.
I'm a biologist, so.
Okay.
So when you're making aliens and stuff. All right. So it's time to move forward. This is Michael's cue, so he could just fast forward and watch for when we do this. The bottom line, aka the terrible twos. By the way, for this episode, I told this to Mohammed, I always try to avoid wearing green shirts with a green screen because it disappears. But this time for the Twilight Zone, I decided, of course I should do this for the Twilight Zone because that works. And I'll wear like a half jacket over it. So it just makes it look like, as I told Mohammed, I'm a soulless minion of orthodoxy. Star Trek fans will get that reference. Quote, as well as Neil knew the Twilight Zone quotes. And I read his script like 20 times when we shot it, and I didn't even know they were Twilight Zone references. So nicely done there, Neil. Here we go. Moving on. Question number one, the two most important questions of the show. Question number one, on a scale of 1 to 10, Dr. Mohamed Noor, aka Dr. Mohamed Noor, what would you give this first episode of The Twilight Zone?
I give it a 9. I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. I was very engaged the whole time.
Wow.
Yeah. I think if we adjust, and then I'm slightly adjusting for time, because I mean, you can't say, well, the graphics suck. Like, well, okay, come on.
Mm-hmm. Wow. All right. And that was quickly answered and with vehemence. Like there was no doubt in your mind. That is a good one.
Good hint on the next question.
Yeah. What about you, Neil? Would you watch the second?
Hey, what is the next question again?
I'm sorry. I start moving forward with my mouth. Sorry. On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you give this first episode?
Okay, 1 to 10, and then I answer if I'm going to watch.
Not yet. That was my fault because Mohammed alluded to it, and I just jumped on it and went with it.
Okay. Great minds think alike, as it said. I'm also going to give this a 9. I thought it was fantastic. I kind of want to answer. I don't know if I'm giving away the next one.
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay.
Hold it in.
I want to explain why I'm giving it a 9. Why I'm giving it a 9 and not a 9.5 or a 10.
Oh, sure, you can do that.
Because there's some other episodes that I think are better. I think this
grading
is a
on a
really good
scale.
episode. So because I got to leave room for my absolute favorite episodes, which would be 10 out of 10. So I'm going to give this a solid 9.
What are your favorite episodes?
10 out of 10 episodes. Ooh, the Monsters Are Due on Maple Street is 10 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Next Stop Willoughby, as I mentioned, I think is 10 out of 10. These, you guys know these ones. It's a Good Life, I think is a 10 out of 10.
What's the one where the guy dies and he has his dog with him, and then he goes someplace and he thinks it's heaven, but they won't let him in with the dog?
Oh, that's hell.
But it turned out it wasn't heaven.
Yeah.
That was hell.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know that. I know the one where the guy thinks it's heaven because he's like winning all the time and he's getting everything.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, that's classic. I remember that one.
And he's like, and he gets everything he wants. He's like, wow, this is great. I got money. I got the girls. I got this.
Yeah.
But then he goes, I'm getting
Bored.
tired of this. I want to go to the other place. And the guy, the other place. I want to go to heaven. He goes, this is the other place. Like you're in hell because you're in hell is getting everything you want.
Yeah.
Anyway,
sounds like hell to me too. All right. So boy, I was suffering through that. Okay. You said great minds think alike. I do not have a great mind. So I, instead of a 9, gave it actually an 8, which I was very surprised, and it's a well-earned 8. Maybe it deserves even higher than an 8, but it was more because there were a couple things like talking to himself, that could get ironed out. But if I were to grade it on the curve of what I expected from it, Jesus, practically a 10. You know what I mean? Like it really, it makes me understand, okay, wow, people like this show, not because back in the day there were 4 things on, but
Well,
and they're
there
just
were.
like,
It's
I'm just
true.
watching this channel because it's either this or the news or the news or the news. But there were actually some really good shows, and this was very good, very well written, well acted, directed. What was that, Warner Brothers lot? It looked familiar. I don't know how something could look familiar from 6 years ago, but I think it looked like Warner Brothers.
It's
Maybe
shot
Neil
on the
might.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, an 8 might deserve more, but for me, it was a very impressive 8. Mohamed, for the purposes of this podcast, we all had to watch the first episode of the Twilight Zone. Now that the podcast is over and we're free to move about the internet, would you watch the second of your own volition?
Absolutely. Unequivocally, yes.
You are very sure today. This is great. You're not going to get me to poop on this show. It's good.
Nope. Really, really, really liked it. And I actually even more than I thought I would. I remember liking it as a kid, but I haven't really watched it since. And I watched it again, like, wow, this is really good. So that was great. I was very happy.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Neil? Of your own volition, would you watch the second? We're all dying in anticipation.
Yeah, so as you know, this is one of my favorite shows of all time, if not my favorite. Top 3, I would say Seinfeld, The Wire, and Twilight Zone.
Nice.
I think my top 3 shows.
It's a very diverse set there.
Yeah, well, I try to mix it up, but it is probably the single biggest influence on my writing.
Wow.
And my vision, I think, as a filmmaker is really based on the Twilight Zone. I watched this show as a kid. My dad was a big fan, and I've just watched it throughout my life. I'm actually pitching a Twilight Zone-esque TV anthology series. It's kind of Twilight Zone, but it takes place now with like things that are going on now, but and different from Black Mirror. It's more fun and shorter episodes with twists in them. So I love the Twilight Zone. There's a lot of episodes that I don't think I've seen all of them. There's like well over 100 episodes, but I've seen most of them, and it's fun. If you haven't watched the Twilight Zone, maybe you're a little bit younger watching this, maybe you've never seen it, I highly recommend watching it. Look up some of the best episodes, watch them without them being spoiled. But it's funny, a lot of these episodes, like, they've kind of entered the cultural ether.
Yeah.
So like you kind of like know,
like
even
Shatner's airplane one, and the one with the nose people.
Oh yeah.
The doctor's office.
Yeah, like you might know what the twist is because it's just part of our cultural ethos now. But the show is wonderful. Rod Serling is a genius. And as we said, it's very cinematic. I mean, you've got great directors working on these. You've got great composers, cinematographers. For the 50s and 60s, it's a really beautiful show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd recommend it to any new viewer as well. I think it would be, it's great. It's smart. It's good writing, presumably, and I think people should check it out. I would not watch the second episode of my own volition. Not because of any reflection on the quality of the show, but just because it didn't give me any reason to. I know that episode 2 is going to have nothing to do with episode 1. So I'm not in any way incentivized to be interested in episode 2 because I'm like, well, it'll probably be good, but I know it won't have anything to do with what I just saw. So it's almost like it's another gamble for me. Is it going to be good? I don't know. Probably, maybe. I don't know. But, nothing I was invested in this episode carries over to the next. And so if it was on and somebody was showing it to me and I ended up watching it, I'll just bet I would have enjoyed it. And I will enjoy it. And I'd be happy that I watched it. But there's nothing that's making me say, oh, I can't wait to watch the next one, So
fair point.
Again, not a reflection on the show itself. It certainly deserves all the adulation that it gets, but there was nothing that made me want to watch the second episode, and I'd be perfectly fine with not watching it. And right now, Neil's like, if I ever have you produce another one of my movies, I'm going to name 3 episodes that you have to watch. Otherwise, you won't even understand what my movie's about.
Yeah. I'm gonna you know what I'm gonna this
Give me
is to
homework.
be continued. I'm gonna strap Ryan down and make him watch like Monsters are doing Maple Street. You gotta like that is it's so it's so like prescient for like what's going on today. Like you watch some of these episodes and it's like the same thing is going on today. They're filled with social commentary, and you see like, wow, the Monsters are doing Maple Street. That is literally happening right now.
Okay.
And it's refreshing.
So I'll watch the 41st, but not the second. All right. But no, I mean, again, very, very pleased, very impressed. And I can see why you guys like the show. I think it absolutely deserves it. And I was wrong about it. But that's it for us. So everybody at home, if you'd like us to review a show, please say WTF or type WTF and whatever the show is. And we will review the first episode of it only. Other than that, check out Mohamed and Neil's stuff in the description box below. We will be showing that down below. Click those links, follow those things, subscribe to this channel, give it a like, tell your friends, and be nice to each other. That's what Rod Serling would have you do, right? That was what he always said. Be nice to each other. No, he always said, be good to yourself and each other, right? That was Rod Serling.
It
was Jerry Springer.
Sure.
All right. No, he was the one that said, have your pet spayed or neutered, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. All right. But thanks very much, Mohamed, for stepping in for Michael Kenyon Rosenberg. And Neil, thanks very much for joining us. Until next time. Oh, wait. This podcast was educational.
This podcast was a fun discussion of a great series.
Pressure's on, Neil.
This podcast made me want to remove my mask.
And don't forget to watch the first of things.
And become an organ donor. Register to donate your organs. Great. See you next time, everybody.